You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network.
You're listening to the Niagara Hockey Lowdown Sabres Edition, your source for all news, press conference reactions, analysis, and objective discussions regarding the NHL's Buffalo Sabres from right here in the Niagara region. Here are your hosts, Brandon Caputo and Austin Broad.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to what is sure to be a very entertaining episode of the Niagara Hockey Lowdown Sabres Edition. COVID-free, right here in the Armchair GM Sports Network, your February 4th, 2021 edition. Your source for North American sports coverage by sports fans, for sports fans, delivered to you right here in the beautiful Niagara region. Find us on social media for updates, giveaways, and sponsorship promo codes each month by following us on Twitter at Armchair GM Pod, as well as this show's podcast at AGM Sabres Pod, as well. Like us on Facebook and on Instagram as well. We got to run many different platforms, including Spreaker.com and the free Spreaker app, as well Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, CastBox, and Deezer by searching the Armchair GM Sports Network, of course. And lastly, our beautiful user-friendly website, armchairgmsports.com, for all things regarding our network, including articles, podcast episodes, sponsors, and contributors. Everything's on there for you guys. Please go and check that out, and please give us a like and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to us right now. As always, I'm one of your hosts of the Sabres Edition podcast. You can follow me on Twitter, at Caputo13 with the Canadian Z. My name is Brandon Caputo, and as always, I'm pleased to be joined on the Sabres portion of the network by my good friend and co-host. He is a contributing writer for the ChargingBuffalo.net. He is Austin Broad. You can follow him on Twitter at Austin_Broad TCB. Austin, we're back to talk about the Sabres, and oh boy, are we going to talk about some news today. And luckily for us, the New Jersey Devils did not pass the virus to us on this podcast.
Yeah, we're about the media. We don't know about media yet because they're not in the arena, but it looks like media might be the only people involved with the Sabres organization who aren't going to be affected by the Devils' complete, and the league for that matter, complete mismanagement of their COVID situation.
I can't even blame the Devils at this point. I mean, I can to a certain extent, but
exactly,
it goes to the NHL. But again, we're going to get into that. That's going to be after our little intro and our first commercial break. We're going to really get into our thoughts on this whole COVID situation, debacle with the Sabres being shut down, and the league coming out with some new protocols now after essentially screwing the Sabres out of a week's worth of games, and some news on if we even think that the NHL is going to get the whole season done, and if we're just going to go to a point percentage based thing if they don't think that these games can be rescheduled. So we're going to get into all that. We're going to save that for segment 2 today. In the first segment, Austin, let's quickly just go over these two games that were essentially the last games that we have seen from the Sabres team for at least about a week. Hope they were worth it. So a shootout win versus the Devils on the Saturday afternoon and a 5-3 loss on Sunday afternoon. So two matinees back-to-back on the weekend. The only two games that were played at that time in the daytime were these games, the back-to-back between the Sabres and Devils. The return of Lindy Ruff to Buffalo, and Taylor Hall playing against his former team in the New Jersey Devils, where he won the Hart Trophy a few years back. So, Austin, what were your thoughts on taking only 2 of 4 points from what is considered to be the weakest team in the division, the New Jersey Devils, who have looked decent at points this season? Jack Hughes definitely looks a lot better, but got to be disappointed with only pulling out 2 out of 4 points and needing to go to the shootout to get that second point there.
Yeah, so my thoughts pre, obviously, this COVID news was, it was a very disappointing weekend. It was, they had a 4-3 shootout win. It was a good win, obviously. Taylor Hall had a nice game there, 2 assists. Eric Stahl and Tobias Reeder, all the new acquisitions kind of made an impact. Allmark was able to help them get a point, which is nice. You wanted to see Linus be able to, show that he can get the Sabres a point here and there and steal a couple wins and a couple points for him, which is good. The second game, just you could tell it was just a very lethargic effort. The players didn't really seem into it. They had some mental lapses. They gave up goals in the last couple seconds of the period. Every time they fought back, they kind of just gave it back. That was a day where, we talk about it. The Sabres goaltending was obviously one of their biggest question marks, and it's still a huge question mark 10 games into the season. There's been times where Hutton and Allmark have looked great. There's been times where Hutton and Allmark have looked like, AHL goalies can kind of seem like too much of a stretch for what they've looked like at times because it's just been so up and down. Now, obviously, my opinion is a little bit different now, knowing what we know, knowing that the Sabres had concerns with New Jersey's health and COVID situation. Like maybe they mentally checked out. Obviously, there's no way to prove it, but it seems to fit with how lethargic and how uninto this game that they looked. Taylor Hall on the COVID list now. We talk about how he's kind of been looking not effort lacking, but he hasn't looked the same the last little while. He's on the COVID list now. Obviously, we can't assume anything, but there might be more at play here for why the Sabres were so, not disappointing is not the right word because they did get a win, but why they were so uninspiring over those two games because, as we know now, there are so many outside factors to this game that we didn't know about at the time.
And with that, the one shining star that we can say about Linus Ullmark is his shootout performances, Austin. This guy has been essentially lights out when it comes to the shootout. We were joking, with text back and forth that, Linus if Linus would play as well in the shootout as he, would during the game, he would definitely be an elite goaltender. But with that said, his shootout performances have definitely been better than most of us had expected from him, given what we've seen, during regulation.
Yeah, he's actually the second highest save percentage on shootout attempts of any goalie in NHL history. He's stopped 30 out of 35 attempts for an .857 save percentage. The only goalie with a better save percentage is Johan Holmqvist at .865. So
wow.
For any goalie that's faced at least 20 shots, Ullmark is second all-time in shootout save percentage, which backs up, like we said, he is a master in the shootout, which is funny because when we had Robin Lehner here, he couldn't stop a puck in the shootout. Seems a little bit of an anti-Lehner here. Ullmark struggles at times in the regulation, but in the shootout, you're pretty confident that the Sabres actually can pull off a win when he's in net because all he does is stop the puck.
Mm-hmm. And it is unfortunate because New Jersey had, their starting goalies out, their backup goalies out. They have, what's considered to be a guy that was picked up off waivers, a goaltender, Eric Comrie, who's, picked up off waivers from multiple teams. I don't even know how many times he bounced around on the waiver wire, but one time considered to be a very high goalie prospect for the Winnipeg Jets after his performances in the World Junior Championships for Canada. But to be able to not beat him, that right there, says, where the Sabres need to get to if they can't even beat essentially a third-string goaltender and a guy that was picked up off waivers not too long ago. They got to be disappointed the fact that they only came away with two out of 4 points against this guy in back-to-back days. To me, that's almost unacceptable at this point to not be able to take down who is essentially a AHL fringe NHL third-string goaltender at this point.
Yeah, we talked about it. The Sabres, again, the last two games against New Jersey and maybe even the last game against the Rangers are a little bit different of a story. But through the first 7 games, they looked good. But their biggest issue was they weren't scoring, and they're still not really converting their chances. I know they won 4-3, so they got 3 goals, and then they lost 5-3. So they scored 3 goals a game, which is good. You score 3 goals a game, hey, that's really good. But when you look at who the goals are coming from, again, that's a good positive sign. They're coming from the Tobias Rieders, the Eric Stahls, the depth. But it's the top line. Obviously, Sam Reinhart has a big role in this because this is kind of good for Sam Reinhart's contract negotiations because he's showing just how valuable he is to this team because they just don't look the same without him in the lineup. But the big line is not scoring goals. Hopefully that can turn around. I think that's obviously the key to the Sabres' success is if this depth, if the Eric Stahls, if the Tobias Rieders, if the, Curtis Lazars, if they can continue to put the puck in the net, and then the big boys, the Eichels, the Hall, and the Skinner, if we saw Dahlin get his first goal, if those guys start producing offensively while the rest of the team continues to produce, that is a positive sign. But yeah, like you said, when you're playing, Scott Wedgwood and Eric Comrie, and, I hate saying it because they are NHL players, but when you only get 3 goals against guys like that, I think Wedgwood's first win this year was his first win in 35 months in the NHL. That just goes to show you the situation that's going on in New Jersey right now. It's a complete letdown. But, We don't know when we're going to see him again. We don't know when we're going to see the Sabres again. But, like I said, if the depth continues to play as good as the depth has been playing and the top line continues to play good and starts converting their chances, it's a lot of ifs because, that's all we can talk about as Sabres fans is the ifs. That's all we've had for years. But if that can continue to happen, we still might have a pretty good season here because, like you said, we don't know. Points isn't going to matter anymore because I doubt we're going to be able to make up these 4 games. It's going to come down to points percentage. So getting points like the Sabres have been able to do should benefit them going forward.
And the thing with Scott Wedgwood, the guy was a Rochester American, not too long ago, playing for the Sabres organization, and then, beats them. I'm sure that must have made him feel good. But the one point that I want to bring up is that, like you mentioned, like Eichel and Hall have combined for 3 goals in 20 games, if you count both their games played, 10 games each. Both -6. To me, I mean, the power play points are there. I mean, Eichel's got 7, Hall's got 5. But to me, I mean, those are your 2 best players, and they have a combined 3 goals on the year. I mean, you're not going to get too far. It's great when your depth is scoring, but you also need your top guys to be able to produce. And guys like Eichel and Hall know that. I mean, they know that they got to be better, and the puck's just not going in for those guys right now. But the thing that, for me, that's, really eye-catching is the amount of minuses on this team, Austin. And I know plus-minus can be sometimes if you're it can depend on what kind of team you're on. Like, Ryan Graves last year led the league in plus-minus. I don't think anybody's going to say that Ryan Graves is the best defenseman in the NHL. He just happened to play on Colorado on their top line. Whenever they'd score goals, he was on the ice. But with that said, I mean, you look at everybody. Like, I'm going to go through the list here. -6, -6, -6, -7, -4, -9, -7, -6. Like, these are really, concerning numbers to me, Austin. Rasmus Ristolainen is a +2 on this team. When has Rasmus Ristolainen ever been above a -10 in his Sabres career? Right now he is sitting at a +2 with how good him and Jake McCabe have been. They're both +2 somehow on the rest of this team. But for me, that I don't know what is going on with this team, but the minuses are just, they're huge, and they give up a lot of empty net goals. I do realize that. It seems like anytime the Sabres are trying to get a goal late, they end up giving up that empty net goal and just seals it, which obviously affects the plus-minus for the top guys that are out there trying to score the goal. But to me, I mean, that just is a reflection on what this team is so far this year. And other than Risto and McCabe, it doesn't look that great as far as plus-minus. Curtis Lazar leads forwards at +2, +1, actually, with Dylan Cousins. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, like you said, the minuses kind of just continues to show you just how bare their 5-on-5 production is this year. I mean, it's no surprise that this power play is starting to click again, which is good. You want that power play to click. No one would argue against that, but when you're relying solely on the power play, I mean, I'm in a little bit different camp, but I'm going to bring up Victor Olofsson as well. He's got 10 points in 10 games. Very good. 8 of those points are on the power play. Now, he's a 7th-round pick. He's not really a 5-on-5 play driver. He's a power play specialist. It's okay. He's a 7th-round pick. It's awesome that he's a power play specialist. But when you look at, like you said, Hall has 5 power play points. Eichel's got, would you say, 9 or 7?
He has 7, 1 goal.
Yeah. 7 power play points. Like, that's good. Like, you want to be able to produce on the power play. But when you only have, Hall's got 8 points on the year, 5 on the power play, so he's got 3 5-on-5 points. Eichel's got 11 points on the year, 7 on the power play. He's only got 4 even strength assists. Production isn't everything, but what this game is results oriented. Results come from good production at 5-on-5. Right now, the Sabres don't have good production at 5-on-5, unfortunately, and until that changes, they're probably going to hover right around 500 where they are.
That's
now,
clearly
do I think that's going to change? I do. I don't think you can keep players like Jack Eichel and Taylor Hall off the score sheet at 5-on-5 for a complete expended period of time. I mean, when you look at a natural stat trick, it's a pretty good site. It gives you a little bit of information into some basic, analytics like Corsi, shot attempts for, high danger scoring chances, stuff like that. Jack Eichel at 5-on-5 has leads the Sabres with a 67% expected goals percentage. It's basically a metric that allows people to know, it takes into account their shot attempts, their shot locations, things like that. So if just for an example, he has a 67.66% expected goals for percentage. His actual goals for percentage at 5-on-5 is 33. He is being outscored 7-4 at 5-on-5. That's the Buffalo Sabres' best player.
Yeah.
He is not going to continue to get outscored that badly at 5-on-5. This is a weird year. It could happen, but when you look at just using your common sense, you know Jack Eichel, Taylor Hall, and Sam Reinhart are not going to get severely outscored at 5-on-5. So you, as a Sabres fan, there's your optimism right there.
Yeah.
You just know that those guys are going to start producing. But the longer we keep saying that, then it becomes more of an issue.
Yeah.
If this was an 82-game season, I wouldn't be worried at all. But it's only 56 games. We're 10 games in. It's got to start. It's got to start as soon as they resume. They have to start producing at 5-on-5. Otherwise, like, it's going to be another long year for us.
Yeah, the numbers are a bit skewed right now, and you know that that's going to come back down to earth. Just like when you see guys with 40% shooting percentages, you know that that's got to come down at some point.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much room for error, and if these games like these ones that they've had this week are not going to be rescheduled, there's not a lot of room for error, and there's not a lot of time. Basically, their season is cut in half than what we'd usually have for an 82-game season at this point. So, for me, they got to come back, and they got to pick up points fast against some teams that they should, just like they should have against New Jersey. The last thing before we touch on the break, before we go on the break, I want to touch on Jeff Skinner. And he's a top reason for concern for Sabres fans, with the amount of money that he makes and the lack of ice time that he gets. He's averaging 13 minutes and 52 seconds a game, Austin. He has a whopping 0 goals and 1 assist in 10 games this year, 24 shots on goal. What are your thoughts on Jeff Skinner? He obviously shifted up a few times. He's been sprinkled up in the top 6 at times, for a small period of time, but has spent most of the time in the bottom 6, starting on the 4th line. What are you thinking they're doing with Jeff Skinner, and is this time off going to be good for him somehow? I don't know how you can try to spin this into a positive light, but where are we going to start to see the Jeff Skinner that we saw 2 years ago? Is it even possible at this point?
Yeah, so, I mean, Jeff Skinner this is the most interesting situation in the Sabres, because I thought at the beginning of the year when he was put on the line with Lazar and Sheehan, I always thought basically, like what everyone else thought, Ralph Kruger just doesn't like this guy. He's a big goal scorer. He's been very productive playing with good players. He would look good in the 2 scrimmages with Stahl and Reinhart, so we kind of thought he was going to be penciled in there. But this is something that I think started out where it was a punishment for Skinner. Again, Jeff Skinner's making $9 million a year. You want him to be able to be not like a Jack, but you want him to be impactful on both ends of the ice. But unfortunately, it's not Jeff Skinner's fault that Jason Botterill offered him $9 million a year when Jason Botterill definitely shouldn't have. It's not Jeff Skinner's fault that he gets paid to score goals, but is getting paid the amount of money that, you would expect superstars to make. But I will say this, I think it is possible we can see the Jeff Skinner from before, but I think it's a little spin zone here. I think it's even better to see the impact that Jeff Skinner is having right now. I mean, he is basically driving play and making Curtis Lazar and Riley Sheehan look good. Now, is Jeff Skinner scoring goals? No. Again, you got to hope it's just that the positive regression. So his advanced stats and shooting percentage are super low. You got to hope that eventually the best 5-on-5 scorer in the game, or one of the best 5-on-5 scorers in the game, starts to put the puck in the net. Because if Jeff Skinner, Curtis Lazar, and Riley Sheehan, again, this is another thing we talked about. If Eichel and Hall start to produce, and then all of a sudden you get Jeff Skinner producing a little bit at 5-on-5, you're going to be in good shape. Again, this is all big ifs, but the fact that Jeff Skinner is making Curtis Lazar and Riley Sheehan look very good is a positive sign to me, and I think that is my reason for optimism on that Jeff Skinner. Will he ever score 40 goals again in the NHL? Not playing with Curtis Lazar and Riley Sheehan, but if you can get 20 to 25 goals out of Jeff Skinner while playing with those two, your team is in good shape, and your team should be a pretty decent playoff contender.
Yeah, we'll see if he does, somehow get some top power play time. I doubt it, but Olofsson's kind of taking that spot at this point, really.
Yeah, and Skinner doesn't really play on the power play. I mean, he's 12th on the Sabres on 5-on-5 ice time. Like, he's got less 5-on-5 ice time than Olofsson, than Cody Eakin, which is pretty. I mean, it's pretty bad. But when you look at the impact that he's had, and he's getting his chances, he's so snake bitten right now. Like, how many prime scoring chances has he had this year? But I will say this: I don't think Skinner or Kruger was smart when he put this Lazar, Skinner, and Sheehan line together. I think Kruger kind of lucked into it, and it's worked out really well so far. So, good on Kruger for lucking into a very solid line. And if this line can start to put the puck in the net, and if those guys up top can start putting the puck in the net, Sabres should be pretty solid this year. But again, these are all big ifs, and we're already 10 games into this.
And 2 quick notes that I'm not going to touch on much. I just want to point it out. Casey Middlestad in his 2 games has 1 assist, and it was on the power play, more than Jeff Skinner has in 10 games. So just want to point that out. And the other thing I want to point out is Cody Eakin has kind of taken the Curtis Lazar spot as far as getting out there to take a key draw and then getting the hell off the ice and replacing himself with somebody. I kind of like the strategy by Kruger. I mean, it's smart. You get a top face-off guy, go out there, win the face-off, and then get off the ice for your skilled players, and you have the puck possession, and what's key, especially when it comes to 3-on-3 overtime. I do like that strategy, especially if Eichel or whoever else, Stahl, aren't going to win the face-off as much as Cody Eakin and Curtis Lazar. As long as they can get off the ice, I'm okay with them starting it, but I guess that kind of plays into the ice time, I guess, even though it's only a quick face-off and then you're gone. But I do like that, and I do not like what I've seen from Matt Irwin after his first game. First game looked great, and then the last 2 games, after what we saw, I agree with what Paul Hamilton said, that we should be seeing him in the press box sooner rather than later at this point.
Yeah, I'm on the... If Yoki Haru can't play, or if he's being punished or whatever, I'm on the get Will Borgen in the game as fast as you can, because he's already, I think, 24, 25 years old. He would be a very good, solid anchor defenseman for a guy like Rasmus Dahlin, and it would really, if Kruger did it, it would really free up Dahlin to play that freewheeling offensive creativity, create like the play creation style that Dahlin is good for, and the reason we drafted him first overall. So I'm on the free Will Borgen train myself.
Yep. See what you got in this guy. You know what you got in Matt Irwin, and you know what you don't got in Matt Irwin. So for me, I'm all for that, getting Will Borgen in the lineup. But with that said, guys, we're going to take our commercial break. We're going to catch our breath. We're going to take a drink of water and sit back and relax, because we've got some ranting to talk about in segment 2 today. So stay right here. We'll be right back on the Niagara Lowdown Sabres edition right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network. Carmine's Pizzeria Italiano, serving traditional-style Italian pizzas made with the freshest, top-quality ingredients. Loaded subs and their famous chicken wings. Winners of the Reader's Choice Diamond Award, 4 years running from Niagara this week for Best Pizza and Wings in Niagara Falls. Home of the best tray and wing combo in town for the price and quality. Open daily from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m., located on the corner of Drummond Road and Dunn Street. Available for call-ahead pickup or delivery at 905-374-4400. Make sure to like them on Facebook and view their website for their menu at carmine'spizzeria.ca. Carmine's Pizzeria Italiano, way too good. As we all adjust to this new world that we're living in today, masks are now mandatory, and Niagara's own Custom PPE is Canada's leading face mask provider. Visit them online at customppe.ca and choose between several mask options with different colors and sizes. Add your organization, company, or team logo so you make your face masks unique. Available to purchase online 24/7 at customppe.ca and shipped within 1 week. They have the best prices and quickest turnaround in Canada, and no order is too big or too small. Also offering custom floor stickers as well as face and counter shields for your business or workplace. Visit customppe.ca and use the code ARMCHAIR at checkout for 20% off your custom or blank face mask today. Custom PPE, Canada's leading face mask provider. Attention job seekers, if you are currently looking for work in the Niagara region, you owe it to yourself to check out the services provided by the Niagara Employment Help Center, located at 6100 Thoroldstone Road, Niagara Falls, directly across from the Camisos Plaza. Their free services include resume and cover letter writing, community resource and referral information, local labor market information, job search strategies, assistance with clarifying employment training and career goals, employment counseling and job search support, second career information and registration assistance, and all their services are currently provided by appointment only. So give them a call at 905-358-0021 or visit their website at ehc.on.ca, the Niagara Employment Help Center. This Employment Ontario program is funded by the Government of Ontario.
You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network, the Niagara region's best local source for North American sports podcasting coverage. By sports fans, for sports fans.
ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to segment 2, and what you've been waiting to hear us talk about, and what a lot of people have been waiting to hear us talk, but I haven't really gone into it with anybody yet, Austin, because I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to get my thoughts together for this podcast, and I'm probably going to clip this and just post it somewhere so that people know when this starts and when it ends, and then if they want my thoughts on it, they can go listen to this podcast, because I'm not repeating it again, because I really just don't want to talk about it anymore, other than on the podcast, because it gets me so fired up, and it gets me in a bit of rage that I don't want to get into when I'm at work or when I'm out in a social setting. I don't know what kind of social setting I'd, be in at this point in the pandemic, but just when I'm out and about, or somebody asks me, or a friend texts me, I'm going to clip them to this, because this is going to be my response, and that's going to be it, because I really just don't. I'm disgusted with what has transpired with the NHL and how they've handled this situation. Not only, I guess, obviously it is affecting me more because it was the Sabres that were affected, but I think just the way that they have mishandled it from the beginning so far this season just, came to light with the Sabres situation. I think not just people who cover the Sabres, but people around the league have just seen how much of a mess this has been. So, with that said, let's just have a little bit of a timeline here, Austin, and what has happened. We've seen teams have been shut down, players have been put on this COVID protocol list. Excuse me. We've seen that take place, but what happened in the days leading up to this Devils and Sabres back-to-back, I don't even know how they fathom even playing these games, okay? So you have their starting goaltender, Mackenzie Blackwood, be placed on the COVID protocol list. You have Travis Zajac been placed on the COVID protocol list. Those guys didn't even take the flight to Buffalo, so they were back home in New Jersey. To me, that just screams that there's going to be something else going on with this team. If you have your starting goaltender and one of your top center, I don't even know what Zajac is at this point, third line center. He's playing every game. You have two guys already on the list. I don't know what the NHL wants, but to me, if two guys have it on your team, then how does that not give them a right to be able to, at least the Sabres, from the Sabres perspective, say you got two guys on the list. We're really concerned about playing these games to begin with. Why are we even going with these games? So they end up playing the game on Saturday afternoon. Then Kyle Palmieri on the Devils gets put on the COVID protocol list, whatever they want to call it, on Sunday. So now they have three guys, one in which who had played the Sabres the day previously. The Sabres are concerned about not wanting to play this game against the Devils, let alone the back of the back-to-back. Then they play that game, and then we have the whole mess that happens. The Devils get announced with, their entire roster essentially on the COVID list. I'm going to name it off. Nathan Bastion, Jesper Bratt, Connor Carrick, Aaron Dell, Nikita Gusev, Jack Hughes, Andreas Janssen, Yanni Kukkonen, Michael McLeod, Kyle Palmieri, Damon Severson, Igor, whatever, I can't even say his last name, I'm too fired up right now, Ty Smith, Matt Tennyson, Sami Vatanen, Pavel Zacha, Travis Zajac. Those guys that I just mentioned are all on the COVID protocol list for the New Jersey Devils. How the NHL did not see this coming from the two positives and then Palmieri being added to that on Sunday, I don't know how they couldn't justify the Sabres' concerns of even wanting to play the game. Because you know what? Now, the Sabres, their games have been postponed as up to February 8th. The games against the Bruins were canceled, and the games against the New York Islanders were canceled. Taylor Hall, Brandon Montour, Tobias Reeder, Erasmus Ristolainen, newly added today, Jake McCabe, and your 61-year-old head coach, Ralph Kruger, has been diagnosed with COVID-19. The others have been placed on a list. I guess they can't really say if they have it or not. There's certain gray areas of that, but as far as coaching goes. And then you have the former Sabres coach, Lindy Ruff, on the Devils. Hope to God that he doesn't somehow come down with this, because his entire team seemed to have it. So, for me, this has just been a catastrophic mismanagement by the NHL to even... When they saw the positive cases come up with the Devils, the game should have been postponed at that point, and we could have avoided this whole mess. Now you have an extra team with a bunch of players and a 61-year-old coach who now has the virus, and it's just going to make things even more complicated. I'm on the side of, we want to get these games played if possible, but if we have multiple cases and that can spread like wildfire that we've obviously seen through the Devils and the Sabres, after one or two cases, enough is enough, cancel the games. But the NHL chose to not do that, and now they're trying to back up on their tracks, saying that the Sabres did not contact them, and we have learned from multiple sources, Austin, that is not true. And I'm just so disappointed in the NHL because now they've put multiple teams at risk at this point, and they've sacrificed not being able to make up games further on in the season and going to a point percentage because they mismanaged this 2-game series that ends up affecting 2 or 3 more series for 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 more teams down the road. So to me, it's a catastrophic failure by the NHL, and just complete and utter I'm trying to find the right word here without cussing to end my rant, but it is, it's careless. It really is careless to be able to put those people in those positions, and hopefully Ralph has a speedy recovery. But the way that the situation was handled, it could have been easily stopped, and you could easily have not gotten both these teams in the positions that they are now with all these cases. The games against New Jersey, to me, should not have been played in the first place.
Yeah, no, I mean, that rant was absolutely perfect. You summed it up better than I think I could have, because when it first came out, I was pissed off with the Devils. I think at the time, rightfully so, until more news came out. Once I heard the Sabres had contacted the league, said, hey, tell me what's going on here with New Jersey. We need to know before we send our players out there. Sabres were denied that request. The league came out and said, we have no evidence of team-to-team transmission. Okay, so you're telling me the Sabres got all these COVID cases, all these COVID people, these people on the COVID list immediately after the New Jersey series, but it had nothing to do with the New Jersey Devils COVID situation? Like, come on. That's ridiculous. Nobody believes that. Nobody buys that. I wish I could say I was disappointed in the NHL, but at this point, starting to see why the NHL has a reputation of being bush league compared to the other professional sports, because this is a complete disaster. They completely mishandled this. Like you said, the games probably shouldn't have been maybe the Saturday game, I kind of, Zajac didn't travel with the team. I could kind of see that. The second Palmieri was in that game Saturday, and the second he gets added to the COVID list the day after, knowing they have another game, the game should have been canceled. They should have tested everybody. They should have did contact tracing. They should have made sure everybody was okay. They should have. The first game, maybe I can see getting a pass. There is no way that second game should have been played. Not to mention the day after the second game, 4 more New Jersey Devils were added to the COVID list. So the outbreak was clearly on the second they got to Buffalo. The Sabres put them, the Sabres had no choice because the league would not postpone the games. The Sabres had to put their team, their coaches, in a compromising situation. Ralph Krueger is 61 years old, not saying he's in bad health, but he's a 61-year-old guy. Don Granato, the assistant coach from the Sabres last year, had life-threatening pneumonia. Now has been in contact with people who have COVID. He is a health risk. This is a disastrous situation for the Sabres. It's a disastrous situation for the league. The Devils have a little bit of blame, I guess, because, I don't know. Like, the games were postponed, so they played with the players that were allowed to play. Palmieri wasn't on the COVID list till after the game, so is it his fault? No. The league allowed him to play. The league it made no sense. The fact that these guys could get tested in the morning, be waiting for the results, and allowed to play before results were even in is mind-blowing to me. The fact that the NHL believes that there's team-to-team transmission does not exist, or they don't have any evidence of it, is preposterous. The Sabres did nothing wrong. They followed all their protocols. They were forced to play in a series where there was, COVID risk on the other team, and now they have COVID.
Yeah, well,
I don't need science. I don't need science to figure out that there's a correlation to that. Yeah. It's just common sense.
Exactly. What we just saw is a direct correlation of how it happens. And I do believe that somebody has to be held accountable at some point. I think the Devils, and their players and their coaches should, be able to abide by the protocols. I know sometimes, you can be asymptomatic, things like that. But, I mean, we saw it in the NFL. If players were breaking protocol, I mean, they were reprimanded for it. And teams were completely reprimanded. We saw the Denver Broncos played a game without any quarterbacks on their roster. They had a wide receiver from the practice squad starting at quarterback. So what is it going to take? Is it going to take a team losing their entire goalie room and having a defenseman strap on the pads and going into net for the teams to finally realize that they need to be holding these players accountable and figure out what in the heck that they're doing to be able to put themselves in the situation. And we see it with the Canadian division. There hasn't really been that much. Maybe they can clue in the NHL and think that, maybe because the NHL or Canada has stricter, restrictions on COVID protocol than they do in the United States. I understand that it's different down there and they believe in a little bit different than we do up here, but it shouldn't be a gray area between team to team or conference or division to division. It should all be the same. And for whatever reason, we're getting certain teams having the ability to play games and certain teams with the same types of protocols that are, their games are canceled. We saw Vegas. They didn't play. They had basically the same thing New Jersey did. 2 guys went on the protocol list. Their games were postponed. San Jose was supposed to play them earlier this week. Those games were canceled miles ahead of when they were supposed to be played. So for me, it could have been easily avoided. And now the NHL comes out with a statement today, adopts additional COVID preventative measures. With about 20% of our season played, we're mindful in the fact that we might be seeing a more aggressive transmission of the virus and will continue to make adjustments to our protocols as we consult on a daily basis and adhere to the recommendations of our medical advisors, NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman said. It is important to note that while we have seen almost 100 players enter the COVID protocol, fewer than half have done so because of confirmed cases, and among the group, many have not been symptomatic. Our priority has been and will continue to be and to act conservatively with an abundance of caution, understanding that there are many things about the transmission of COVID-19 that are still being discovered. As a result, we won't hesitate to take additional measures as indicated by what we learned and as directed by our medical advisors. To me, that is crickets to me, and this is also a... That's what that statement seems to me from the NHL. Like, how do you not, from what just happened with the Sabres and Devils, do you not see anything being connected whatsoever? Like, what are the preventative measures that they're going to take going forward? Is it going to take 2 more teams to have the same scenario happen, and we're not going to get 80? I understand that the NFL only has 16 games as opposed to 82 for an NHL team, but the NFL was able to get through it and get their full season in. To me, I don't think there's any way with how it's been mismanaged and mishandled to this point that we're even going to get anywhere close to 56 games. I'd be shocked if we reached 40 to 45 at this point with how many games have been postponed, and if we're going to continue in this route with what we just saw with New Jersey and Buffalo, if we're even going to get as many teams as we think, to even around that where the point percentage is going to have to matter. To me, I can keep going in a circle, but I'm just going to end it with saying that they could have adopted quote-unquote additional COVID preventative measures long before this situation happened, and they're trying to go back on it and trying to say that certain things didn't happen when people know that it did. And to me, it was mismanaged, and they knew what could happen if they chose to continue, and now they see what happened when they continued.
Yeah, I mean, like, you've said everything pretty much. It is what it is. Like, there's no getting around it. What you said is exactly the truth with the NHL. They mismanaged the situation. They're trying to cover their own behind, and it is what it is. They messed up. They messed up big time. They're going to have to deal with the consequences that happen this season. They're not going to get a 56-game schedule for every team in this league, so they're either going to have to, like you said, do points percentage or expand the playoffs or do something to even this out, because especially in a situation like the Sabres and Devils, again, are we Sabres fans? Are we a little bit biased? Yes, but it is very clear that the Sabres did nothing wrong. They were worried about playing those games against the Devils. They reached out for more information. They were denied more information. They had to play these games. Otherwise, they would have faced other consequences. And now the Sabres, like the Devils, have a COVID outbreak because of what the league did. There's no getting around it. That's what it is. We can sit here and talk about it till we're blue in the face, but this is the NHL. No one's going to be reprimanded, probably. No one's going to be punished. The league will continue to do this stuff because that's what the league does. We are examining it. We are doing more blah, 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 blah. Like you said, it's crickets. The words mean nothing. Unless there's a punishment, unless there's severe action taken, we're going to continue to deal with this.
Yep. Somebody has to be held accountable. So that's it for your 20-minute rant on that. And if you ever want my thoughts on that, just go back and listen to it, because I'm not going to talk about it anymore, because then I'll just continue to get more fired up. But with that said, now we got to look forward to what? Game on February 11th against Washington. Is that when?
Maybe. We don't know if that game's going to be played, because as more days pass, more Sabres are added to the COVID list. But yes, February 11th and February 13th against the Capitals are their scheduled next two games.
Well, you know what? Wouldn't it come full circle, Austin, if they didn't play another game until they played the Islanders on the 15th, and it was like they were starting off just like they were supposed to 2 weeks prior. And we just start off, we're supposed to play the Islanders, that game gets postponed, and the next time that they end up being able to play after a century off is against the New York Islanders, and we finally get to see what that team can do against this Islanders team. And again, if that... luckily they said no to that game, because then the Islanders would have been, grouped into this, and then that could have been an even bigger mess. And that's the thing; it'll just spread like wildfire if they don't keep it under wraps for one or two teams, and it'll just expand and expand, and then there's no chance of any of these games getting replayed. So we'll hope to look forward to the game on the 11th. We'll see, or the 13th, whichever one gets played. Who knows at this point? But it seems like far, far away, the Sabres will have last played on January 31st, and might not even play up into February 11th. We'll have to wait and see. But that's basically it for today, Austin. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add, but no games for us to discuss, obviously, except for the New Jersey games, and unfortunately no games to preview because of NHL and their protocol, quote-unquote protocol, not being able to reach the standards to keep these teams on the ice.
Yeah, the last thing I'm going to add is, Marco Rossi had his COVID situation back in November. He he played in the World Juniors. He has now been sent back home to Austria because he's still suffering some effects from his COVID situation. Again, we don't know how severe each COVID case is with the Sabres or with anybody else in the league, but if a 19-year-old kid can have long-term health effects, the Sabres could definitely have long-term health effects. Really not nervous, but really hoping that Ralph Kruger's okay, really hoping that the Sabres can recover from this. And yeah, like you said, just be thankful they never played those games against the Islanders, because then it would have been the Sabres and the Islanders dragged into this, even though they did nothing wrong, because again, the league just mismanaged the situation so poorly. And at the rate things are going, I'm praying that they can play on the 11th, because we obviously missed the Sabres, but I wouldn't be surprised if their next game is that 15th against the Islanders, because I don't even know the actual, rules in effect for when they can reopen their training facilities, when they could start practicing again. But I'd have to assume that we'd have to hopefully tomorrow there's no new Sabres added to the COVID list, and then I'll be a little bit more optimistic about the 11th. But if each day passes and more Sabres are added to the COVID list, the 11th is looking a little bit gloomier and gloomier for the Sabres to get back to playing.
Mm-hmm. So we'll have to see. We're, thinking about everybody that's been put on the list for New Jersey and Buffalo, obviously, and Ralph Kruger is being the one, being an elderly person. They are more vulnerable, so hopefully he can make a speedy recovery. And like you mentioned with Rossi, it just shows that why we need to take this virus seriously, and why it was even in debate why the season might not have even been played this year. So we have to do everything we can, and the NHL needs to stiffen up their protocols, or we're gonna start. They might be in some deep trouble if things become worse than just positive cases. If we start to see some very sick people, or heaven forbid, any deaths, then there would be really some consequences that the NHL would have to deal with. So hopefully we don't get to that point, but definitely a bad look for the NHL the last week or so, and it has affected the Sabres. So it was mostly the reason why we wanted to discuss it on this podcast today, and mostly there's no other news going on with the Sabres, so we had to discuss the issue at hand with that, and brought out a little bit of fire in me, and that's okay. Once in a while, it's what people want. So as long as we can continue forward objectively with our show, that's what we'll do, and hopefully we'll be able to come back with you guys and discuss those games against Washington and the New York Islanders coming up, because those are some key games for the Sabres, and every game and every point matters to them from here on in, especially with these new cancellations. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for tuning in and listening to us and rant today on the Niagara Hockey Lowdown Sabres edition right here in the Armchair GM Sports Network, your source for North American sports coverage by sports fans for sports fans, delivered to you right here in the beautiful Niagara region. As always, I'm one of your hosts of this podcast, Cappy. Follow me on Twitter at Caboose13 with a Canadian Z, as well. You can follow my co-host Austin Broad at Austin_Broad TCB. Make sure you're checking out what he's doing at the Charging Buffalo. Some great stuff there with your analytics, Austin, and your game tracking. It's very fun stuff, very cool stuff to keep up with. And stay tuned for our articles as well. Make sure you're checking out those articles on armchairgmsports.com. We put a lot of effort into those. So a big thank you to all of our great sponsors who help put us on Sport the Network, keeping the show on the air. And finally, to you viewers out there and Sabres fans for tuning in and listening along for this episode. Please be safe. And once again, this is the Niagara Hockey Lowdown Sabres edition on the Armchair GM Sports Network by sports fans for sports fans. Take care, guys. We'll see you soon.
Take care, guys.